Hello, my name's Jane Wilkinson. I work on behalf of Get Into Teaching, and I'm going to explain to you today what a life of a teacher looks like and how you can consider getting into teaching yourself. So the question that's this presentation is leading with is, could you use your skills to enable students or young people to learn from your experience? And I think that is very, very pertinent to a teaching career, because you really never know um, what kind of stories you're going to be telling from a day-to-day basis, or what kind of experiences you can be and memories that you can be making, that you'd be passing on and reminiscing about throughout your career, really. So different people have different reasons for getting into teaching. My reasons was more of I'm not really sure I want to become a graphic designer in the way that I'd planned all of my education for, and so therefore I was hoping um, to do that. I'm working within the marketing aspect, and I was able to get some internships towards the end of my degree, did some of the work in a couple of different businesses, and whilst I enjoyed the novelty of it was very, very quick to wear off, and I found that I was sitting in front of a computer a lot of the time, and I miss those kind of human interactions that I perhaps would have had in my university course, or just in general day-to-day life. And so I'm really fortunate that I had people around me who was frequently dripping into my ear, "Oh, you'd be a good teacher." And it was something that I very much took with a pinch of salt until I was in my third year of my degree, and I was thinking, "Oh, what on earth am I going to do? Because I definitely don't want to be a designer anymore." And so therefore, I started to look into the benefits of teaching and teacher training. Um, and it was a very, very broad spectrum. So the idea of having a varied way of career, the opportunities for developing your career in lots of different areas and vocations was really quite exciting to me. But also, if I'm totally honest, the idea of a secure and a stable profession with a good pension at the end of it, a reasonably or much better starting salary than what I would have been on within the design type of career pathway, was certainly very, very inviting. But I think different people have very, very different reasons for getting into teaching. So, for example, I met a young person in the University of Manchester yesterday, and from the age of 6, this person knew that they wanted to be a teacher. That certainly wasn't my experience, because as I've explained, came to that idea very, very late in the day, really. Um, but generally speaking, people want to become a teacher either because they want to spread the joy of their subject matter, or they want to work with young people and essentially make a difference within the community that they live. I think it's not to be underestimated, the kind of influence that one can have on young people when they are in school. Um, I have many stories in regards to how things that I feel are almost throwaway or flippant comments can be made within a classroom, but actually makes a lifelong impression on some people. So the kind of things I'm talking about are the Afghan or the Somali refugee children who I had the real pleasure in teaching. They was newly arrived to the country, Um, the Afghan children I taught in London, the Somali children I taught in Bristol, and they were traumatized. They had come from and travelled through very, very different, difficult circumstances, but they really had a wish to learn and to become better in their education, and so therefore the first thing that they needed to do was learn English. So within a very, very short period of time, with both groups of children, we was able to get them through the GCSE syllabus, because when they'd arrived they were already in year 11, and so therefore not far off sitting their GCSEs. And it is somewhat a sense of pride that these children were able to gain that GCSE. But they did seem to be something quite peculiar about teaching somebody who's not English as their first language things like Romeo and Juliet, where the language is so ancient and underused in common parlance that actually it seemed quite strange. But those children, were given keys essentially to go on and make the best of their education. The thing that I thought was quite funny, though, was the fact that obviously these were children living in southwest London and in Bristol, but they ended up having a very broad Yorkshire accent. Um, so I think there's lots of anecdotes that we as teachers can go into, but I think what I always had within my job in the classroom was a real sense of pride of the people that I was working with, and also a lot of fun, because children and teenagers are incredibly funny. So, as I've kind of alluded to, the mixture of opportunity within a classroom setting or a school environment can be incredibly different from one day to the next. And I think anybody who is very, very um, comfortable in routine and ritual, then actually teaching's not the absolute best, perhaps, in as much as there's no 2 days or no 2 years alike. So I spent 10 years in one school, but from one year to the next, that school environment, because of the way that things were changing in the curriculum, the way that we was changing things within our schemes of work and what was teaching, and the differences in terms of the children who were coming into the school and perhaps even leaving with their certificates and whatnot at the end, just made the environment incredibly fluid and very, very changeable. But I think as mentioned, you either go into teaching because you want to let your passion for a subject really, really enthuse and grow people, or you're very much involved in the desire to work and better people's lives. And very much sat on in the latter. And so therefore I did manage to teach a whole range of subject areas, whether it be design and technology, which is what I'd trained for, but also I taught English, um, geography, maths, science, and oftentimes various different lessons in one subject area, because if you came to my class, you got two for the price of one at least. Um, so there's various different types of things that you might look forward to in the school day. And one of the questions that I was asked on a webinar similar to this recently was, what time of the year did you most prefer? And I always think that Christmas time was always the nicest period, because there was a lot of extracurricular activities going on, and there was lots of different types of things happening, and people were just generally a lot more happy in the day-to-day exchanges between each other. And so therefore it was a really lovely period of time. Also, you always had that 2 weeks off over the Christmas period, which my sister, who worked in retail, never ever got. She was back to work. Well, she was working often Christmas Eve and back to work on Boxing Day, and so therefore that period of time over that Christmas period was often very, very limited for her. But obviously for me, I had that full fortnight off to do as I pleased. So in order to become a teacher, there's various different qualifications that you would need to have, and there are um, certain things that you'd need to understand in order to go through with an application. So the first thing that you'd need to do is decide which type of teacher training course you would like to do. Now, um, we tend to make it appear quite confusing because there's this different types of places that you can complete your teacher training, and we give them different types of labels and this, that, and the other. But essentially, they are very, very much of a muchness. There's universities who can lead teacher training course, and there's schools that can lead teacher training courses. But if you had people on those courses explain similarities and differences between them, they would be very, very, very challenged in doing so. All teacher training courses are really hands-on, usually very much from the start, because you pack in a lot of learning into a short period of time, usually from September, but sometimes late August, perhaps even a little bit later in September. But it's that kind of time period until any time between May and July. So you've got a whole lot of stuff to do within that fairly short period of time, and all of that leads to what we call QTS, or qualified teacher's status. Now, QTS is very vocational in its acquirement, so you need to be demonstrating your ability of being a teacher. So you would need to have to be practicing your teaching in 2 different schools at a minimum, and it has to be for 2/3 of the course, or 24 weeks. Now, while you're doing that teaching practice, you will be planning lessons, you will be understanding the special educational needs of the children within the classes, and so therefore making differentiation for those learners. You will be teaching the lesson and making sure that everybody's accessing the learning objectives. You would be thinking about how you are going to assess that learning, and how you're going to teach the next lesson to build upon what you've already achieved. You will also need to be working with professionalism around the school environments. So you would be perhaps attending things like parents' evening and reporting back to parents the progress that the children have been making. You might be attending staff briefings or departmental meetings, or you might be involved in an Ofsted inspection, for example. So there's lots of different types of opportunity that you can actually access within the teacher training course itself, and it's all built in to allow you to create a portfolio of evidence for QTS, or qualified teacher status. Now, if you've got QTS, you can be employed in a school as a qualified teacher and be paid as such. Without that, then you'd be on a much lesser salary. The other part of a teacher training course is the academic side of it, and oftentimes it's referred to as the PGCE. Now, the PGCE qualification, or the postgraduate certificate in education, is essentially 4 essays or assignments that you would create, written at master's level, so it's level 7 qualification, but not quite a full master's degree. But you can use those credits if you want to go ahead and look at getting a master's degree within education. You could use those credits to top up and gain that. But essentially, the PGCE element isn't the hands-on stuff. It's very, very much the academic theory of teaching and learning, and the QTS is what you are doing on a day-to-day basis, working in your two school placements and practicing your teaching. So the theory and the practical kind of come together quite nicely to enable to allow you to become the best teacher that you can actually be. There's a variety of financial support available for people who are considering getting into teaching, and depending on your degree classification, the subject that you want to teach, and the kind of area that you want to teach will will denote what type of funding you are eligible to. But if you are currently a student in the UK and you're gaining student finance, then that would continue into a teacher training course. So even if you've got master's level education, you can still get teacher training funding for the tuition fees and for maintenance loans and things like that. Um, for certain subjects, there are tax-free, non-refundable bursaries and scholarships that are something that you would apply to the industry body for. Now, you have to be eligible to student finance to get the bursaries or scholarships. So if you know that you're going to be able to get student funding, then you would get the bursary and the scholarship. If there's queries in regards to your eligibility to student funding, then do contact Student Finance England just to review that. But a lot of information can be found on the Get Into Teaching website under the funding tab, and so therefore if you've got any questions or queries in regards to that, that would be a good first place to start. So getting the right teacher training course is absolutely vital to you getting the best opportunities within your teacher training. So as I've mentioned, all of it's very, very hands-on. It's very, very practically focused because you're working towards that QTS. But essentially, the reason that you're wanting to get into teaching ought to inform your choices. So an example that I use is for myself, I had a real interest in special educational needs or alternative learning needs, and I wanted to build a career with that as a focus. And so therefore, when I was looking at teacher training course providers, schools and universities, I was looking for opportunities where I would be able to work in really solid and successful special educational needs and disabilities departments. Now, in my first school placement on the course that I did, I was able to work in a school. It was a mainstream school, but it had within it a special unit for children with hearing impairment. And so therefore I had that. And then in contrast, I had a very, very comprehensive school, but that had very, very high proportion of special educational needs. And so therefore I was really able to build my skills in terms of making sure I was able to work with a broad range of children with a broad range of skills and perhaps disabilities. And that was something that was really quite pertinent to the start of my career, but also throughout. So when I started my first job, I was able to specialise in special educational needs within the design and technology department. When I then was leading on PSHE, I was then able to make sure that the resources were adapted sufficiently so that lots of different children could access that learning. And then eventually I was able to go in and work in alternative education in a pupil referral unit where a lot of the children had needed to have special educational needs identified but hadn't, and so therefore had been excluded from mainstream teaching. So very much my very early experience on my teacher training course very much had an impact and effect over my long-term career. And so therefore getting the right provider for you is vital. So you can search for courses on the DFE Find. You then, I would always say, research thoroughly at least 5 different providers that are local to you. There's no reason to travel miles, and there's no reason necessarily to consider reputation of a teacher training course. Head teachers, when they're appointing new teachers, just want to know that you've got that QTS and you've had a broad experience range, and so therefore they're not that fussy about where it is that you've gained your QTS, because actually you don't spend a lot of time with your actual course provider. It's in your 2 different schools. And so therefore find 5 local places that are easy to access, and then shortlist, really find out what it is that they're doing, how they're doing it, when their start and end dates are, what kind of assignments they would be setting for the PGCE element, what kind of level of experience the mentors would have, what kind of extracurricular activity experience you'd be able to have opportunity of. And once you've found all of that out, and by speaking to them directly, you would then be able to make a short list of 3 providers to apply to, with 2 in reserve. So once you've decided where it is that you would like to apply, then you need to meet the minimum entry requirements for a teacher training course. Now, currently that is for a secondary school teaching programme, you would need to have GCSEs in English and Maths at grade C or level 4 and above. But if you would like to teach in the primary sector, then you would also need to have a science subject. So that can be either a combined science qualification, or it could be a single science qualification such as biology, chemistry or physics. You would also need to have a UK undergraduate degree. All of these things you can provide an equivalent for as well. So if you have studied overseas, then you can use an equivalent qualification, but that is something that you would probably need to check with the providers as to what it is that they will or will not accept as a suitable equivalent. Once you have met that minimum entry requirement, you can then think about making your application. Now, generally speaking, a lot of postgrad courses are applied to through UCAS, which if you're at university at the moment, you would be familiar with. But for teacher training courses in England, you need to use the DFE Apply service. Now, this is a similar kind of application form to what UCAS might have been, where you would include which place you're applying to, or places where you're applying, your personal contact details such as your name, address, national insurance number. You would then also include a CV type. I don't know if you're all getting these pop-ups that I'm getting, and I hope I'm not glitching as much as it seems to be. So we would also have things like a CV almost section where you explain where you have worked or had relevant experience, and then you would have a 2-part personal statement as part of your application. You would also need to have at least 2 different referees as well to support your application. So it's certainly worthwhile speaking with referees quite early, just to make sure that they're going to be able to fill that reference request in, and that they're going to be able to suitably comment on your ability to work with young people. So the application form is fairly lengthy, but essentially there's lots and lots of support that you can access to enable to work your way through that. In regards to the help and support that's available, we have a group of fully qualified and experienced teachers who are able to work with people through their application from start to finish. And when I say start, it's even if you're in the very first kind of an acorn's been planted stage, and you're just considering, oh well, what would a teacher training course look like, or would a teaching career be appropriate to me? So we can have that dialogue about what your career progression could look like. We can talk about what day-to-day life and workload is like, and how the kind of strategies that we've used to enable us to work through those types of you know, workload pressures perhaps. But if it is something that you would like to go ahead and apply for teacher training, then we will have a one-to-one discussion about you and your needs and your kind of motivations and challenges, so that we can absolutely get the best possible and strongest application completed in a very, very short time period. So we know that people who use our services, it's all totally free. We know that people apply much quicker and much, much more successfully, so therefore much less stress. Um, we have a couple of groups of advisors. We have people who work with first and second year undergraduates, and we work with other people who can physically apply at the moment, so third years or beyond, so even postgraduates, where we would be able to help people either start their career or change careers. So if you looking to get into teaching, then definitely get one-to-one advice. The other thing that we offer is various different online types of support. So we've got Twitter and Instagram pages, we've got Facebook and YouTube, but within Facebook in particular, there's also groups that people can join for peer-to-peer support, as much as advisor to or expert to aspiring teacher support. So essentially, we can look at getting into those groups, and that would be change career to teaching, or the aspiring teachers forum. So those would be the two groups that would be applicable. If you would like some personalised support, you can get guidance directly to your inbox. So this would be direct mail letting you know about events and things that are going on, perhaps deadlines, changes to ski courses, or various different things that happen across the year. We can send that directly to your inbox, so just feel free to scan the QR code that appears there. We are very, very happy to answer any kind of questions within our website, whether it be quick questions through our chat. We've got telephone numbers that on the Get Into Teaching website that you can call us on, and there's also the Get an Advisor button right at the bottom of the web page, if you would like that kind of one-to-one support and advice. Now that is all of the slides, so I'm just going to start looking for any questions. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop that into one of the chat boxes or to the question box. So we have had a question, and that's about international students and looking at their eligibility for teacher training courses, and also for how you go about making contact with a teacher training course provider. So very specifically for international applicants, the best thing that you can do is get into Teaching Advisor. They are able to put you in contact with our overseas qualifications team, who will look at your qualifications to give you either a verbal check, or if you're not quite ready to apply, or if you are ready to apply, they would be able to give you an ENIC certificate, which is a statement of comparability to say whether or not you meet the eligibility criteria. So that would be the best way of supporting an international student. For anybody talking about getting in touch with the teacher training course providers, on the DFE Finds, there is a profile of each provider, what they look for, what they are offering, and right at the bottom usually there is a whole explanation of who to contact. Now it's that contact detail that you should either send emails to or make a call. Now again, the advisors can give you a list of questions to actually ask to enable you to make a really good and informed choice about and decision about whether or not it would be them that you would apply to. You would also start highlighting your kind of most suitable attributes and qualities, so that you're able to start making a relationship with those providers so that you can, you know, hopefully be successful. So find out things like what do their interviews consist of, how long their course will last, all of that kind of thing. But do have the conversation. It's absolutely vital to do so. The next question that we have is, are applications accepted year round, or is there a specific window in which to apply? Now, the deadlines for teacher training courses are somewhat elastic. They fill on a first come, first served basis, and so therefore it's definitely a good idea, particularly if it's going to be a popular subject area like such as primary, PE, perhaps history. It's really important to get an application in before Christmas this year if you're looking to start in September 2022. For other subject areas, moving into the spring is okay. They probably still will be places, but it's a good idea to find out from the teacher training course providers how many places they do have. Um, and making an application as swiftly as possible, because obviously over the summer holidays a lot of the courses will close down, and they won't be responding to applications. The next question, if I want to teach history, would experience with teaching abroad be counted as relevant experience, or would this person be better off at getting experience in history in the UK? Either or. Any kind of relevant experience will help strengthen and support an application. So if you have worked with young people in some kind of youth organisation such as cadets or scouts or that kind of thing, that you will have developed skills and attributes that you can speak about in your application and an interview. If you have had teaching experience either as a teaching assistant or teaching perhaps English as an additional language or something like that, either in the UK or overseas, then again, that is considered relevant experience. But certainly an understanding of the way that schools as communities work and how the national curriculum functions and that kind of thing can really help and strengthen an application. But I think knowing what school environments are like is certainly a good idea. Get that try before you buy experience, so that you know that that teaching is actually for you, is always going to strengthen your application. Teacher training costs for international students do vary from provider to provider, and so therefore it would be a case of having that dialogue with, if you are an international student, having that dialogue with teacher training course providers to find out what their international student tuition fees would be. Generally speaking, for home students, we're looking at around 9,250. Um, so somebody here would like to work with teaching adults, either in further or higher education. What kind of training course and the minimum entry requirements would be for that? So for non-compulsory teaching, such as working in FE colleges or indeed at university, you actually don't need any teaching qualifications whatsoever. You only have to have teaching qualifications if you are working in the compulsory sector, which would be early years, um, primary, and secondary schooling. Each individual college and university will have their own requirements, both in terms of minimum expectations, and usually they'll have a list of desirable and essential criteria that you would need to check. And many do ask for specific teacher training type courses, but they will all be different, and there's a whole variety of options there. And so therefore finding out from the potential employer what it is that they're looking for would be the best way forward in terms of teaching FE and HE. But it's definitely, there is a website specifically for FE training and teaching, and so I think it's fe.org.uk. um, that kind of advice would be more applicable. So somebody's been trying to get some school experience through agencies, and they're struggling to get jobs because they've not got classroom experience already. What kind of things do the Department for Education offer? So we do have the Get School Experience portal. So if you um, do a web search on Get School Experience, we'll have a whole list of schools that are willingly opening their doors to people who are considering having a look at what a day in the life of a teacher appears to be. There is a website called Get Information on Schools that will list every school in the country, including the contact details for people like the head teacher. So there's nothing to stop people from reaching out and asking there. I would also suggest people use any contacts that they've got with people in schools. So if you know a teacher or a head teacher or a caretaker within a school, then use those contacts. So I think there's various different openings depending on where you are geographically and what kind of phase you're actually looking at. The next question. So somebody who's in their last year of their, so final year of their degree, and they're currently making applications for Scottish universities. Now, if you're applying for teacher training in Scotland, Northern Ireland or Wales, then you would still continue to use UCAS. If you're applying for teaching in England, then it's that DFE apply. Um, this person is struggling for references, so who might they kind of consider? So generally speaking, you need two references, and this is where sometimes that relevant experience can really help. So if you have participated in leading a scouting or cadet group, or if you have done some tutoring, or if you've had a part-time job in the local shop, all of those places are opportunities for references, and I think sometimes you've got to go out and make those opportunities. The other option would be to have academic references from either your current institution, the university that you're studying in, or perhaps a place that you was had prior learning. Um, it needs ideally to be somebody who knows you quite well. So I think people who have done perhaps remote learning can sometimes struggle with the academic, and that's where the kind of employment based references, or indeed a character based reference, if you've done some, kind of Saturday work or something like that, then that would be the place to start looking for that. So again, another question regarding GCSE grades or equivalent standards. So that would be a case of getting an advisor who could then put you in touch with the Department for Education's overseas qualifications team, and we would look at providing you with a verbal check to say whether or not your grades that you achieved in your home country are equivalent to GCSE or otherwise. And if they're not, then what you can do to remedy that. Is there a different application or interview process if you apply for school direct or SCIT or university? Absolutely not. So currently there's 3 types of administration that teacher training course providers would use. So it's either administrated by a university, a school-centred initial teacher training facility, or a SCIT, or school direct. They are all very, very similar in the way that they are put together. They all lead to QTS, but the application process and the interview processes generally are the same. You would apply through DFE Apply, and you would go for interview and hopefully be made offers of places at the end of the course. Like with anything, depending on the institution itself, then there will be differences in the actual format of the interview, but there's no 2 universities that are going to be the same. There's no going to be 2 schools that offer the same kind of thing. And so therefore, while you're shortlisting your providers, do make sure what their interview process or regime looks like. So generally speaking, you will have a sit down panel type interview where you'll be answering questions often led by why would you like to be a teacher? And then there'll be other types of activities, oftentimes a kind of a written test so that people can check for your literacy and maybe even numeracy. There may be a presentation that you deliver either to a class of young people or to your peers who are at interview. And there might be some kind of subject knowledge audit. So nothing is overly difficult. It's not there to um, trip you up in any way. It is there to kind of really get the best out of you. Again, it's something that the teacher training advisors can help you with as well. On the application form, it says something like, why are we suitable for teaching this particular age? What if I'm applying for both primary and secondary? Um, it's not necessarily recommended that you would apply for both primary and a secondary subject, because it will come across as if you are very, very indecisive. You're not fully aware of or familiar with the way that schools work for either primary or for secondary. So it's certainly a much, much more risky strategy. Essentially, if you are looking to do that, however, I would certainly focus more on, I want to teach young people, and very much explain why you want to teach in general. So what do you feel you can offer the profession, and what do you feel you will gain from teaching young people? The second part of the application asks you why you've got the subject knowledge for teaching, and that's sometimes where it can get a little bit more difficult. But essentially, having a good focus on literacy and numeracy, which is something that all teachers of any subject and any phase would need to teach, that can get over that hurdle of applying across two different phases. Once you have QTS, you are able to teach either in a primary and or a secondary school, however. Do you use the DFE application process to apply for PGCEs and School Direct, or is it just the one? No, all teacher training courses need to be applied to, whether it be university led or school led, through the DFE apply portal. And so therefore you would start by going on DFE find to find the courses that you'd be looking to. Then you can go on to apply for them, whether it be school led or university led, and then hopefully you'd be offered a place. If you're not, then you can use apply again with using the same form to enable you to make further applications. Do be aware that there are some providers such as Teach First, where you would actually apply very much directly, so they sit outside of the normal application routes, as it were. The next question, is there any support available for writing your personal statement? Absolutely. So my team of early engagement advisors and teacher training advisors, a lot of our work is explaining how to write the personal statement and then reviewing your first and second draft of that statement, so to ensure that you're making the best of that application, making sure that you're able to make a strong application. So again, going on to the Getting to Teaching website and going down to the bottom of the page, clicking on the right button to say get an advisor, that is going to be the best solution to writing a personal statement. So this person has got a Bachelor of Education from India, and they want to know, excuse me, do they need to get QTS, and would they get sponsorship? So if you would like to work in schools in the UK, then absolutely yes, you have to have QTS. Whether or not you'd be able to get sponsorship is going to depend on whether you're meeting the eligibility criteria of residing in the UK for a certain amount of time. And so that would be something to explore with a teacher training course provider on a one-to-one basis. So somebody is asking, is there a particular training required to teach SEND children apart from the normal teacher training courses? There are some courses that do specialise in special educational needs, but all teachers need to be able to differentiate their learning for all of the people that are in front of them. And so therefore all teacher training courses will allow you to learn about working with children with additional needs. And so therefore, depending on the kind of environment that you would like to work in, whether it be mainstream or special school, that would kind of give you a bit of a steer in terms of what type of teacher training course subject you would be choosing. So this person has around 5 years of teaching experience online and face to face outside of the UK. They would like to become a teacher in the UK. Where would they start? So you would definitely need to have to do a teacher training course that would award you QTS, because that essentially is your vocational license. So if you want to be paid as a qualified teacher in the UK, in fact, it's not just England, you would need to have qualified teacher status, and that would allow you to teach. However, if you wanted to be a learning support assistant or a a higher level teaching support assistant or HILTA, you do not actually need any specific qualifications. Often your experience can help, and so therefore registering either with teaching supply agencies or having a look at things like council websites on their job pages, the Times Educational Supplement and eteach.com for support work, that can often help get that initial experience within UK schools to go on and get further paid employment. But if you're looking to be employed as a teacher, then getting the QTS is the best option to ensure that you are paid as an actual teacher. What qualifications or certificates are required for teaching assistants jobs in schools and in universities? Um, do they even need TAs in universities? And what do private language assistants ask for? So there's various different questions within this question. So just as I've replied just now, for teaching assistant jobs in schools and or in universities, you do not need any specific qualification. Often it's based on the experience and the qualities that you may have developed to allow you to get into those types of jobs. However, um, it it's always going to be based on the person's spec. Excuse me. So you would need to just double check with the essential and the desirable qualifications that those places are looking for. Private schools or academies, perhaps language learning centres, do not necessarily mean you have to have any type of qualification either. And so therefore checking with them what their entry requirements are, their essential criteria, would be the way forward with that as well. Is there any qualification that leads to special educational needs and disabilities training, but also work in the communities and doing research? The only thing that somebody who is interested in that could be working as a teaching assistant, so that wouldn't necessarily award a qualification. But if you was wanting to work in special schools and or mainstream school settings, then the qualification that you would absolutely need, Yolanda, would be to have QTS essentially, so that you can migrate onto community project work or even researching type facilities. So what happens if you don't get an offer for the first 3 applications that you make through DFE Apply? Once you've made your 3 and they've not been successful, or you've chosen not to accept perhaps an offer and you would like to apply again, then you use the same application. You may edit it. So when you are given feedback from the providers of whom you've applied, you can make changes to things like your personal statement to make reference to, perhaps other work experience that you might have had or something that you might have missed out of your original application. You can put that in and you can apply again through DFE Apply again. So it's the same form, you just apply using that. It's just pressing a different button, and essentially you get to choose one provider at a time to apply to, and that can be over and over again as many times as you would like. Somebody who is looking for what type of suitable course they would be able to access, um, even though they've got teaching experience already from India. So you would need to apply for, so you'd need to look at courses that are advertised on DFE Apply, then sorry, DFE Find, and then you would need to apply for those using DFE Apply, and they would all award QTS. It's the only suitable way of becoming a teacher in the UK. Those are all the questions that I can see. If there are any further, please do let me know. Apply opened on the 12th of October. So essentially, anybody who would like to gain QTS may do so from now. People have been applying, people have been getting their places, and so therefore, if you're in any doubt, do speak to us at Get Into Teaching. We can certainly help with applications, with finding courses, with achieving the statement of comparability for overseas qualifications. We can put any concerns to rest that you may have in terms of perhaps starting salaries or career progression or various different other things. So do get in contact with us for that kind of help and support. I'm still looking for any further questions. I think I've got them all. So, so somebody's just contacted, they missed the start of the session. How can they get in contact with Get Into Teaching? So if you go onto a web search and look at Get Into Teaching, there is a button set to say Get an Advisor. That would be the one to use, but I'll also pop that into the Q&A box as well. Somebody's still waiting on references and starting to get worried, because actually that is one of the holdups that we can have in regards to teacher training courses. And so therefore, just ask them, drop them a text or an email and say, oh, have you received the request for references? Because sometimes it'll be emailed to them, perhaps to their junk or their spam box, and they've not actually seen it. So making sure that you've prepared them to say, oh, I'm going to be sending a reference request, and then checking that they've received it can often be the kind of prompt that you need to have to able to get them to do it, and to allow you to then submit your application. Another question in regards to the last dates for applications. So generally speaking, you can apply up to courses starting in September, but places do fill on a first come first served basis. And so if you've got a particular provider that you're desperate to do your teacher training with, then quite often, if you've left your application much after the end of June, then you may have missed the boat. Are there any January starting courses? There are some, but they're not in abundance. And so again, if anybody's looking for part-time or courses that don't start in September, then an early application is certainly recommended. Any further questions? So this person has said, thank you very much. I think the next best course of action is to get in touch with an advisor to know which is the next or best step. Absolutely. I can't reiterate enough how much easier your application process will be if you have got somebody on a one-to-one basis explaining what it is that you need to do next. So I have posted the link, getting an advisor, into the Q&A section. So certainly do feel free to use that link. Anybody else, any further questions before we make that a wrap? So as mentioned, the advisor service is utterly free. There's no charge to it. All of the advisors have um, many years of experience. I think within my team alone, we worked out we've got about 250 years of experience. And so therefore use that experience, use that expertise in terms of the application. We would be more than happy to help you, and you do get our telephone numbers and you do get our email addresses so that you can just communicate. I'm not seeing any further questions at the moment, so I will wish you all the very best and hope that you very much enjoy a teaching career.